Welcome everyone to something new that we're trying here at the Humanist Society of Santa Barbara, which is a discussion on a book which is relevant in this day and age. My name is Judy Flattery. I'm the president of the organization, and we're very, very fortunate to have a skilled expert in this area to lead our discussion. Let me tell you a little bit about Marian Shapiro. Marian has worked as the Director of Education for Planned Parenthood in the Bible Belt for 20 years. She was certified in Sexuality Education by the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists. She got her BA from Cal Berkeley and her Master's in Social Work from Kansas University. She worked across Kansas as an education, counseling, and training specialist and taught at 2 state universities there. In 2002, Marian returned home to California and she taught the Psychology of Human Sexuality at Santa Barbara City College for 11 years, retiring 6 years ago in 2015. At the Humanist Society, we feel very fortunate to have her as one of our members. Her enthusiasm, her community activism, and her photographic skills are very much appreciated in our community. And she's going to lead us through a discussion on the book, This Is How It Always Is, about a family with a gender dysphoric or transgender child. So Marian, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'm so happy that you're all here. I hope we'll have a nice, lively discussion about this book. I suggested the book when Robert Bernstein asked me if I wanted to lead the book club, and I have to embarrassingly tell you that I'm not a reader. Reading has always been hard for me, but I listen to books on audio, and I listened to this book and I thought it was so good and interesting, and so I said I can suggest a good book to start the book club with, but since I probably won't be in the book club since reading is still hard for me, but I was happy to join you for this discussion. And I thought we should do a little poll to begin with. So all you have to do is check the answers. It's very short, but it gives me an idea of who I'm talking to. And if you answer the first question, how did you read the book? Did you listen to the book? Have you not read the book? If several people have not read the book, we'll probably summarize a little bit more so that we can give them an idea of what it's about. Whether you like the book, check there and just keep scrolling down and you'll see that there are only 3 questions. And then you have to hit submit. And then maybe Dave can show us the answers coming in.
Yeah, we have 6 responses so far. And when we end,
we have 50.
I'll share it so everybody can see the results.
Yeah, are we going to get to see it? Yeah, here we go.
3 read it, 2 listened to it, 4 haven't read it, but it sounded interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Of the people that read it, 3 thought it was interesting, 2 said they loved it and learned a lot, and of course 4 didn't read it. And our genders, 1 male, 8 female that responded.
As we start the discussion of the book, I want to realize that we may have gotten very different things out of this book. We don't all get the same thing, and that's why it's nice to have a discussion, because other people may notice things that I don't notice at all. And probably not too many of us here are experts at this. I'm not an expert, but I've taught about gender dysphoria, and I probably answer some questions about it. But I have several friends who have kids, and if anybody has experience and is willing to share, we're very happy to hear from people who know about this more than we do, than I do. An example of me not getting some things, the first time I read this book in January, I was so focused on just the gender dysphoria, the whole issue of that, because I taught about that. I missed the fairy tale part of this story, that thread in the story. I just sort of skipped over that because I thought, well, that's not so interesting. And then later, when I read through it the second time this month, I saw how that really was an important thread in the story, and how the father used telling the fairy tales a way to help his kids deal with the issues that they were dealing with, not just transgender, but other, all sorts of issues in life, self-acceptance. How do you go through important and sometimes very stressful issues in your life? Some of you, I'm sure, are aware that this has become a hot potato issue in our government. Arkansas is the first state which has just done a terrible, terrible law, overriding the governor's veto, and making it a law that doctors cannot help transgender kids with hormone blockers, which are in some cases really lifesavers that help these kids with something that's very, very difficult for them. So 23 other states are considering similar bills to what Arkansas has done. And I just hope maybe reading this book and learning how to be allies and help kids and adults that are dealing with gender dysphoria, maybe we can help educate our fellow citizens. So let's start out. I don't want to do most of the talking here. Let's start out and just tell me what did you think as you read the book? What were you impressed with? So we're starting with the people who have read the book. How did this book impress you? What are your feelings about it?
So I'll start. I really loved the book. I don't think it's perfect. I thought the characters were maybe a little too pure, but I appreciated that the author offered these wonderful people. So I kind of keep in mind that it's a novel, it's not true life. And in doing that, I really appreciated the author's style and her humor, and the story that she wove and the characters she presented.
Thank you. Other comments?
I'll go.
Yes, Doris.
Yeah. I also really enjoyed the book. I have a 20-year-old who is agender, so doesn't see themselves as male or female. And even though the circumstances for my transgender child are radically different than for Poppy, I still resonated with several aspects of the story based on my experience. So I enjoyed it. And similar to you, I did not focus on the fairy tale piece, and I suspected there was more to it. And I look forward to going back and listening to the book again.
And your camera just went off. Oh, there it is. Okay, we couldn't see you for a few seconds. Thank you, Doris, and thank you for joining us. It's so great to have somebody who's probably got a lot more experience that it's nice for you to share that. We really appreciate it.
I'm so happy to, because community is so key in all of that. And that was one thing in the book where it didn't seem like there was a tapping into the LGBTQ community. And that was something that we were able to do, which was wonderfully powerful and beautiful, and all the support and connections were super helpful.
Great. Other people, Judy.
Yeah, I listened to it, book on tape, and I really liked it. I thought the author's writing sometimes was just really almost like excruciatingly beautiful. I'm like, oh, I wish I could turn a phrase the way she did. That really expressed something very subtle and nuanced. And parts of it broke my heart, you know, but it wasn't overall like a sad story. I mean, I think there was a part when when the child was saying, you know, Mom, can I be a woman when I grow up? You know, can I wear a lab coat? Can I do this? And he's like, of course, when you grow up, you can be anything you want, you know? And he's like, oh, that's great. Okay. So then can I be a little girl again then? And I was like, ah. And so it never occurred to me that I've heard things about how you don't want parents making the decision for a child when they're young, that you're going to be this way or that way, do reassignment surgery or things like that. But then if they have to wait till they're an adult to make some physical changes, then have they lost the opportunity to grow up as a little girl? I don't know if I'm expressing it correctly or well, but that really got to me. And also how confusing it must be for a young person to be trying to navigate the world when and try to understand what the perceptions are out there versus their sense of self.
Yes, I think it's very confusing. And I think that people tend to think black and white. They tend to think it's all one way. In other words, there may be somebody who is happy to have the hormones of the gender that they feel they are, but doesn't want to have genital surgery, or, you know, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It can be anywhere along the spectrum. And so I think one of the things that Penn, the father, and Rosie, the mother, clashed about was, you know, are we making decisions for big decisions that she should be able to, that Poppy should be able to make herself? And I don't think hormone blockers are not making irreversible decisions. You can take hormones for a little while and it can help you get through a year or 2 years or a few years. And you still don't have to have surgery and whole body changes, but you can. I mean, it's postponing something. And there are plenty of people that, in my human sexuality class at City College, we had maybe 12 or 14 speakers who were transgender, and they made different decisions. Some of them decided not to have as much surgery as others, and partly it was the cost. You know, now transgender people are a lot younger than some of our speakers. One of my speakers was 65 years old, I believe, when she had her surgery. 65 years old. That means she suffered a long time before she actually came out and said, I'm not who you think I am. She worked as in an administrative position at the university for many, many years, and everybody knew her as a man. That's who she appeared to be, and that's who they saw her as. But she always felt that she was a woman. And from 7, she told about when she was 7 years old, she used to pray. They were in a religious family, and she used to pray every day, please God, make me who I am, make me a woman, make me female. And of course that never happened. But when she was, I think, between 60 and 65, she finally had enough money. I think it was $100,000 to do all the surgeries. Every hair on her face had to be with an electric thing had to be, they had to kill each hair. And it was a long, long and painful procedure to go through. And hormone blockers, if she had had that when she was 13 or 14 or 16, she might not have had the beard. She might not have had that, but they didn't have those choices back then. Another thing, since I said the word choice, I have to make very clear is that sexual orientation and sexual identity are not choices. We don't choose to be gay. We don't choose to be transgendered. It's who we are. It's just something that the way we are. It may be from hormones. It may be from genetics. We don't know exactly how that happens, but we know it's not a choice. So those people who say you made the wrong choice, you shouldn't have encouraged this, you shouldn't as parents or something, that's bullshit. I mean, it's just not, it's not a choice. Okay. Yeah.
Marian, question, like, it seems like we're seeing many more people who are transgender these days than in years past. Do you think that, what do you think that's about?
I think that in years past, some of you are as old as I am. I grew up in the 50s and 60s. At that time, it was much, much more separate, a binary choice. You were either male or you were female, and you had to be a certain way to be accepted. Males were bigger and stronger and more athletic, and they liked things like football, and women were not. Women were something else. Also with jobs, there were hardly any female doctors and lawyers and engineers in the 50s. There were a few, but now I think I heard somewhere that half of law school students are female. So things have changed a lot from the 50s. And
More than half of STEM graduates, I believe, are women now.
yes, thanks, Jim. So
Science, technology.
yeah, so we're not, to be a male in the 50s meant a certain way. And one of the things was that you're attracted to women, not men. And if a man was talking about being lovers with another man, that was not acceptable then. So what did people do? They stayed in the closet, which was very sad that they couldn't be out. And if you can't be out, you think nobody else is like you. You feel very much alone. And when you feel very much alone and that nobody else is like me, it's terribly lonely and scary. And when you think that somebody may beat you up if they know who you are, that's terribly scary. And now there's not nearly as much aloneness because of the internet. People can Google transgender and find out that there's a whole community of people who are just like you, just like me. Just, you don't feel so lonely. And you know how to get in touch with other people. You know how to get in touch with groups that are supportive. That wasn't true in the 50s. In the 50s, people who were very different were often suicidal and did not make it through adolescence. They killed themselves.
Oh,
yes, Doris. Please, Doris.
I was just going to add, so my 20-year-old basically had gender dysphoria when they were going through puberty. So that's when it showed up for them. So we're talking like 8 or 9 years ago. And it was very confusing for them because agender was not something that was well known and, you know, on the computer and all of that 8 or 9 years ago. Nowadays, in that short period of time, it's much more common knowledge that people know what agender is. But for my kid, and they were doing this on their own, they were trying to figure it out. They thought, oh, am I gay? I'm not gay. You know, like, what's wrong with me? Because there was no way to identify. So when they eventually learned about being agender, they embraced it, and it just huge. It was huge. So
Thank you.
yeah.
That's terrific.
So, you know, before Stonewall, it seemed like there were a lot fewer gay people in the world, right? So it just created a space for people to come out. And I think even more so now with trans, I mean, a few years ago, no one even, you know, no one had heard of such a thing. And so it gives a space for people, and agender, and intersex, and the whole gamut.
Yeah. Anybody
Yeah.
else?
Marian, I attended a talk a couple weeks ago by it was Secular Student Alliance, and they had someone on who talked about being born as intersex, and that was kind of a new one for me. And they explained that they had some biological parts from both the male and female, and that when they were young, and this person I think is about 35 now, when they were young, the family pediatrician counseled the parents, you got to choose and have them be one way or the other. And the parents chose female. And so surgery was done, multiple surgeries, when the child was, you know, between birth and age 11, never really telling them what was going on, what it was all about. And then when they became of age and realized what was going on, they were very resentful, and said that they would have been perfectly happy staying the way that they were, and went on a campaign to have hospitals ban this surgery before the age of consent. And actually were successful getting that done at, I think it was the University of Chicago Hospital, where their surgery happened, and some other places as well. I was wondering if you had any comments on that, the surgical interventions, and the mother saying, you know, I was trying to do the right thing for my child, and this is what was advised to us. And I think the mother carries around great guilt. And the child has compassion for the mom, and yet is left with a problem because the parts don't work. I'll say it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think intersex is probably, I don't know. I'm just guessing that intersex is much less common than gender dysphoria. I think there are way more people who are gender dysphoric than those that have testicles and ovaries. And it's too bad that in our culture, the first thing that people ask you about a baby is, what is it, a boy or a girl? And so you can understand the parents cannot accept, well, let's just wait and see what this child turns out to be and let this child choose. That's extremely difficult for parents, but I think it's probably, especially if they're intersex and they have parts of both male and female, it would be the best thing to wait and see which way they identify, how they identify, not just how their body is, but what their feeling about themselves is, what their identity is. And so that's it. I don't know what the solution is, but I don't think it's a bad idea to say surgery should be postponed until they can consent. Then it's their idea. I think offering hormone blockers so that a little girl like Poppy doesn't have to go through growth of the penis and the testicles and beard and all of that would have been terribly traumatic for her as somebody who identifies as female.
So, you know, in the book, we don't know how things turn out, and I hope people are ready for spoilers, because there are bound to be some. But one of the things I appreciate about the book is that it covered a lot of these things. So the discord between the parents the author used that in a way to explore different, upsides and downsides about puberty blockers. And also the fact that there are two cultures that are in the book, and the second culture has different attitudes than ours about, about many of these things.
And we can
So-
say that that's Thailand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the importance of choosing or identifying, male or female is less there, or at least it's portrayed that way through one of the characters says, oh, we don't have that insistence. So it's interesting that a lot of what we're talking about, you can find elements of it in the book.
Yeah. And I think she did a terrific job of showing how stressful it was when the parents didn't agree, when the parents had different ideas about what to do. Rosie is the mother, Penn is the father. When they disagreed about how to handle Claude or Poppy, did you feel more like Rosie and agree with her more of the time, or did you feel more like Penn, or were you torn?
I definitely identified with Rosie, I think partly because she was mostly the narrator. So we sort of got it from her point of view. And also she painted Pan as being kind of reactive and in a fantasy world. And he acknowledged some of that. So he was presented as the more rational of the two.
Yeah, I identified more with Penn during their arguments because it seemed like he was doing the research and trying to come up with solutions. And I could see that that's probably what I would be doing in that situation. And certainly, my husband and I have been involved in situations where you're trying to figure out what's the best thing to do for your child, and you have different points of view, and neither of you know that you're right and how it's going to turn out. And so, just kind of reading how they dealt with that, you don't know you're right and the stakes are huge type of an issue. It's a big parenting challenge.
Yeah, I totally relate to that. When at age 16, we decided to have gender affirming surgery for my child. And so it was a double mastectomy. And fortunately, after much discussion and a variety of things that happened, I felt like I got to a place of clarity and peace that it was the right thing to do. And thank goodness it was, I think, a lifesaver. And I'm so glad that I had the clarity and that we went ahead and did the surgery.
Mazel tov.
Yeah.
Very good. Marian, we can hear you now.
It won't last.
Okay. What were you going to say before?
I just have a lot of questions. I didn't understand what was said before about the parents deciding things early for the child, and then the child was unhappy with it. How in the world can you ever figure these things out for a child?
The case that Judy brought up was somebody who is intersex, which means they may have parts of male and parts of female. There are babies that are born with ovaries and testicles. And then they advise, it's sometimes advised that you wait and see what the child turns out to be. But this one family that Judy heard about, they were advised to make a choice, to just say, okay, we'll get rid of either the ovaries or the testicles. We'll make this child one gender or another.
So intersex can also be, incomplete or minimal development of external genitalia, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think sometimes the doctors, at least they used to be, that they would make the decision.
So Marian, what was decided in this one case that Judy talked about was that they would make this child one gender, I forget which one it was, and the child later on said they resented it and they didn't like the choice. And that's the reason that sometimes it's best to not make a choice, but it's very difficult because in our culture, we always say, is this a boy or a girl? We always
And-
want to know.
When a baby is born, is it not always clear?
It's not always clear.
What would be-
I remember having a lecture that was a national Planned Parenthood meeting where a physician said in about 4%, which I think is very high, in about 4%, there's some ambiguity. It may be slight. It may be that the penis is smaller than normal or the clitoris is larger than normal. But there's some difference. But in some cases, it's not slight at all. It's ambiguous and you don't know if it's a girl or a boy. But sometimes the doctor decides and just makes a statement, okay, this is a girl, or okay, this is a boy.
And
then
what happens after, as that, I guess we don't know, but if a doctor makes a decision and then later on that child grows, and is the child confused or?
yeah, if there's really not a clear male or female in our culture, it's more of a problem. As Jim was alluding to, the culture that was in this book that was a lot more accepting was the Thai culture, where they didn't have quite the same demand that everybody be clearly male or female. There was an acceptance of that you can have characteristics of both and that it's acceptable.
So it's not just confusing. I mean, what Judy was talking about was anger because, things didn't work, right?
Right, yeah, I guess what they said, and I put it in the chat, the person's name is Pigeon Pagonis, and they made a 14-minute documentary movie about their experience, and the mom is there explaining what it was like for her to have to make these decisions, and Pigeon was talking about, her experience growing up. And I think that, yeah, the parts didn't work, meaning she does not feel any pleasure during sexual intercourse. And, so things didn't really turn out for her to be 100% girl. And what they said is that had they grown to the age of consent, they feel they would have been perfectly fine just being themselves without any surgeries,
So did this
beyond
person
anything medically necessary. Yeah.
So this was a child who was born who was ambiguous, and then there was surgery or there was not?
Yes, this was a child who was born intersex, so both parts, and the doctor told the parents, this child will really suffer unless you make a decision one way or the other and take care of it before they get to puberty. And the sooner the better, because the longer they're confused, the worse it's going to be, that kind of a thing. And so the parents did what they thought was best at the time. Yeah.
And the
And
doctor was
it might
wrong.
have been better. It might have been better to leave the child alone till the
Yes.
age of consent.
That's what Pigeon says in her movie. Yeah.
And I think it's important to realize that these are very different things. Identity, who you feel you are, orientation, who you're attracted to, expression, signs that you give the culture who you are. And they don't always exactly fit. They don't always match up exactly. Somebody may identify as female, but have a more male type of expression. I remember one kid in my human sexuality class looked like any other male. He did not look unusual in any way, but at some point I noticed that he polished his fingernails, and he had red fingernail polish. And that's expression. That does not mean that he doesn't want his penis. It doesn't mean that he wants breasts. It just means he's expressing a little bit of femininity by polishing his nails. It's just one little part. So we can't come to these conclusions based on either one little expression or that there's male and female parts. We've got to go with what that person says and what that person feels like. And if we don't give permission, if we don't have an accepting society, they may never feel comfortable in saying how they identify. But identity is not the same as expression. It's not the same as sexual orientation. These are all different things, and it's all on a continuum. It can be, you know, a small amount or a large amount, or anyway.
So in the book, Poppy seems to be all about expression. I mean, she never says anything about her body or her preferences or
Yeah,
anything like that,
that's
just
true.
about how she wants to behave or dress or, right?
Yeah. Back to the question about Rosie and Penn disagreeing. I felt torn about it. Penn was so loving and supportive of Poppy, never hesitating for a moment to support whatever Poppy was expressing. But Rosie anticipated the opposition and worried about how to face the opposition, how to help Poppy not be shamed and rejected by the school, by the teacher. Her kindergarten teacher was not accepting, said, you know, you can't be this way, and friends. So Rosie was more worried about how she will be accepted. And of course, as a doctor, she had this terrifying experience of having a trans woman die in her arms. She came into the emergency room and she had been shot for being a trans woman. And she realized, Rosie realized, that what her little Poppy was facing was maybe people who were so angry and unaccepting that they might threaten her, that they might want to kill her. And sure enough, they had that experience with the one where the father said, you faggot, get out.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
Nick.
yeah.
Nick,
Nick.
yes, Nick. I couldn't think of his name. Nick was, she went over there for a play date, and the father was just disgusted that when he found out that Poppy, who he thought was a little girl, had a penis, and, you know, totally rejected him. And these things these are really so sad. I think these are the things that made people cry when there was this kind of rejection of a sweet little girl.
Mhm.
So, and because of Rosie's medical training, I think she was more worried about the risks of hormone use and surgery. So she was slower to see how life-saving they were. But Penn realized that this would be wonderful to have the hormone blockers to postpone puberty until Poppy could, you know, consent and make her own decisions about hormones and surgery.
Yeah,
Oh,
Marian, another theme in the book was, you know, that I think we wrestle with all kinds of different family issues and challenges, is how much do you hide and how much do you share, and how open do you be, and when is it gossip, and when is it medically private information, and that whole world. And then, you know, you don't want to hide too much. And so they struggled with, do we tell people or do we don't tell people? And if you're not telling people, are you deceiving people? Or just kind of wondering about any thoughts anybody has about that whole world with relation to this book.
Well, they were sort of forced into hiding it by their neighbors. And they described it at some point as an accident that they were hiding, right? So sometimes it's hard to, because of the swirl, what's going on around you, it's hard to control it. And that's what happened to them.
Yeah. For those who didn't read the book, which is more than who read the book, when they moved to a more liberal part of the country, hoping that would make it easier for Poppy to be accepted, the neighbors, when Rosie and Penn were planning to not keep a secret and just be open about it, thinking this is a more accepting part of the country. But the neighbors said, well, we decided not to tell our kids. We're going to not tell them that Poppy has a penis. And so that kind of forced them to keep that secret. It wasn't their decision. That's what Jim was saying.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very difficult to, whenever you keep, that's the trouble with being in the closet, is that you cannot be yourself. You cannot say, this is who I am. And then if you say, this is who I am, the liberating thing about not keeping the secret is that then you can get acceptance from people for who you are, and you feel a lot less scared. But you can also feel condemnation from some people. So that's the hard part. That's why you don't know. We spent a lot of years, not by choice, but we spent a lot of years in Kansas, and it was quite conservative. And I think the one statement that somebody made to Penn when he went to pick up Poppy somewhere was, God did not make mistakes. And since God gives Poppy a penis, you can't interfere with God's plan. That was stated in the book to Penn. And that's, I think, the kind of thing that keeps people from being open, is they don't want to hear that. They don't want to hear the condemnation.
Yeah, it was also interesting in the book, there were 4 other brothers, older brothers, to Claude / Poppy, and the different ways that they responded. And some of them were worried that for Poppy, some were, they just took, and some felt almost like neglected, like the parents' attention was on Poppy in this situation. And so I thought those dynamics were very interesting too, and the different personalities of the older boys. Yes,
and Rue, the oldest boy, he really had a difficult time of he felt uprooted from all of his friends and his culture in Madison, Wisconsin, when they moved to a more liberal part of the country. And somewhere in the book, I remember it saying, you made all these other children give up what they wanted for Poppy. So it was very difficult. What did you think about Mr. Pongo, those of you who read the book? Was he helpful? If so, how? Or not helpful? Irritating? Any
Well,
comments?
he did help the parents understand that their child had an identity issue. Not all of his advice may have been up to par, but that was very important in making them. But I would like to know, what does one say if, say, a stranger says, is that a little boy or a little girl? You have to come up with something to say.
You might say, he or she hasn't decided yet.
It's a very difficult situation. There is no perfect way to handle it, no way to not be uncomfortable.
Exactly. And I don't think you want to say, well, ask them. I mean, you don't want pressure on them. The hard part is you're trying to protect the kid. I think Mr. Pongo, at times he was kind of annoying because he clowned around and he made fun, but they loved him and they kept on the relationship with him after they'd moved away from Wisconsin. They kept calling Mr. Pongo.
Who was Mr. Pongo?
He was the school, I think he was a school psychologist.
Oh, okay.
And I thought that his messages, the author used him to give some very important messages to our society. And I think what he did the best was normalize what they were going through. He made it sound like, yeah, this is what we do. This is what parents do. These are your jobs. And this is, you're doing a wonderful job being supportive, but you have to let this kid know that some things are too hard to, don't let people say you can't be who you are. You can't lose your identity. I thought some of his words were the most important messages for us as allies to understand and to help families. As an activist, I think we need to help, because especially now that they're making laws in other states that are so just awful and painful to families. Marian.
Just to kind of ask a different kind of question, we all remember how the gay issues seemed to crumble before our eyes about 20, 25 years ago. What is your best guess, all of you, about how long these kind of issues are going to be so difficult for the children involved or the people involved? Do we have any sense of how quickly society will change to absorb this as it has absorbed so many other serious changes, significant changes?
I think it's happening right now.
Mm-hmm. And you think it might go as quickly as the whole thing with the gay situation, where, I mean, we were just watching this wall come down, and it happened so fast.
I think so. Anybody else?
Well, some people are putting walls back up. We're looking at a Supreme Court that could end gay marriage, for that matter. I mean, things are not settled yet.
That's true.
Marian,
Yes.
you used the word ally, and I know this term is used a lot in the transgender community. Maybe you want to explain that.
An ally is somebody.
Ally.
Yeah. I used to hear it a lot with the LGBT, lesbian and gay, when there were laws made or people were trying to change the law to support gay people. We would be an ally by saying we're for it. Let's help this, donating money to organizations like GLAAD, which supports LGBTQ people. So an ally is somebody who helps speak up and say, even though I'm not gay, I want to support gay marriage. I want to do what I can to support the representatives from California and New York, and the coastal areas are probably the more liberal areas that support laws that help LGBTQ people. And so an ally is somebody who works for that, who speaks up. If somebody says something that's very condemning, says that's not nice, that's not acceptable to us in our community. We don't want people to feel rejected and not supported. So that an ally would be somebody who speaks up. Is that clear, Nan?
Yes, yeah. I just know it's a very common term that they use all the time.
Yeah, an ally is just somebody who's supportive, but not necessarily part of that group. If I'm not a gay person, but I can speak up for gay rights, for gay marriage, for that it's not right to discriminate and refuse to make a wedding cake for a gay couple.
The parents and the whole family and the neighbors, I mean, most of the people in that book are allies, to Poppy. They're all people who accept Poppy and support her decisions and so on. So they're allies just in that simple human sense.
Mm-hmm. What did you think of Rosie's mother, Carmelo Walsh?
She was too wise to be true.
I was thinking, I'm not a grandma yet, but that's the kind of grandma I want to be.
Yeah, me too.
I'm one of the people that has not read the book, so I would like to just have an opportunity to add a couple of comments.
Yes,
Marian was talking about wondering how long it was going to take for the situation to change in general in society. And my view is that it's actually happening already quite
Yeah.
quickly. And when we look at how quickly gay marriage became possible, that is extremely hopeful. And I have to say that within our immediate experience, within our two families, we know of two examples of teenagers who are taking on a different identity, coincidentally. And so that's actually the reason why I tuned into this program, because I'm very interested in the situation of teenagers. Both of these young people are, let's say, they biologically girls, but decided to change their names and be more boyish. One of them dresses as a boy. One of them dresses sometimes more boyishly, but quite often in feminine dress. And so we are watching this situation with great interest and support. The family is very, very open about it. There was never any judgment about this situation whatsoever. And it seems to me that if we already know two people who are in that situation, it must be becoming more common and acceptable. But our only question is, one wonders how much of this is becoming a kind of a fad or a fashion in certain demographic groups. I mean, the people that we're talking about are relatively affluent, highly educated. The children go to very intellectual academic schools. And so I'm just wondering if you have any comments to make about that.
I agree with you 100%. I think people are coming out now because it's more acceptable. And the reason it's more acceptable, I think, is because there's more connection, thanks to the internet, between different communities. I think I said before, if you grew up gay in 1960 or 70 or 80, you may not have known that you're part of a much larger group. I knew kids in the small town in Kansas where we lived. My husband got his first college teaching job in Hays, Kansas, which was a town of 25,000 people. It was the smallest place we'd ever lived. I grew up in Berkeley, he grew up in the Bronx. And we were sent to Hays, Kansas to teach at the university there. And kids who grew up gay in Hays, Kansas thought they were the only ones because it was not safe for people to be out. We knew college teachers who were gay and they were completely in the closet. They never went to anything together because they didn't want suspicion about that they were gay. And so the kids who were growing up gay, it wasn't that there were none of them. They were there, but they didn't know anybody else was gay. And I had written a number of articles in the newspaper about how people aren't gay by choice and it's who you are. And so they knew that I was a safe person. And some of these kids came to Planned Parenthood where I was counseling. And the biggest thing that I'm very proud of was that I think I saved some of those lives because some of them were suicidal. And my message to them was, hold on, as soon as you graduate from high school, you can go off to college somewhere else. You don't have to stay in this little small town. You can go to Denver, you can go to Kansas City, you can go to Lawrence, Kansas, you can go to Wichita, where you'll find a whole bunch of people just like you. And that was hope for them. That helped them understand that they weren't the only ones. But now we have the internet. So they know and when they're 12 years old, when they're 13 years old, they can go on the internet and find that there are other people who are just like them. So I think this is what's very hopeful, is that but it's not all positive, because the internet has also allowed very punitive, conservative people to get together too, and to oppose all the things that we want to have tolerated. So it's a mixed bag, but I think that's why there's a good chance that the acceptance will keep growing, just like it did for gay marriage. I think I agree with you completely that it's happening already. It's already there.
And I think it's accelerating too.
Yes.
Mhm.
It's Sharon Adams.
Oh, hi,
And-
Sharon.
Hi, Marian. Excellent thoughts there. And bringing it up to the present time, on Netflix, most of you may have seen these programs, but there are excellent role models in a film called Ballet Boys. And there's also the character in Madam Secretary.
Cat.
And I think they are just illustrating that times have changed, thank goodness.
Yes.
And these programs are really healthy, in my opinion, and should be brought to the attention of anyone who needs a little bit of a boost along the way.
I second that, because the character of Cat in Madam Secretary is just wonderful. If you haven't seen it, go look for her.
That's a long series, right? It's a TV series?
Yes.
Yes.
And is it in Denmark?
No, in Washington, D.C.
Oh,
And she appears in the second half of the series, so she won't be in the beginning at all.
okay.
There's also a series called Transparent, I think it was, that
Oh, yeah.
featured the main character was transsexual.
Yeah, can you comment about that word transsexual? We don't hear that word so much anymore.
sorry,
like in the
I really
Rocky
meant
Horror Picture
transgender,
Show
but
time. Is
I really
it?
meant transgender.
Oh,
But
transgender.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I know they had that famous song in Rocky Horror Picture Show, transsexual in Transylvania thing, but it's not an accurate term these days. Is that right, Jim or Marian?
I think that's right. It's not, I don't hear that used as much. I think it used to be an umbrella term. I think now more transgender is used. I think the definition that I heard was a transsexual is someone who's been through surgery and their body has been changed.
And they also used to say transvestite, like cross-dressing. I don't hear those terms
that's a totally
anymore.
different thing.
Yeah, I don't
there
hear
are
those.
transvestites or cross-dressers, which is another, it's an expression thing.
Yeah, gender expression.
Yeah, and some people cross-dress because they need that to get sexually aroused, and other people do it as more entertainment, like drag queens. And so those are very, very different things. But all of these things exist in the world, and I think we're learning how to accept different identities, different expression, and just let people be who they want to be and not judge them or keep them out or discriminate against people.
Yeah, Marian, I had heard from my niece and nephew who were educated in the Oakland public schools that they were taught something called I think they called it the genderbread bear.
Yes.
It's like a gingerbread bear outline to teach young children about gender. And it first points to the head and says, who you think of yourself or how you see yourself, in terms of a scale, 0 to 100 male, 0 to 100 female. And then it points to the hands, how you express yourself, the same 2 scales. And then the third was pointing to the heart, who you're attracted to. And it wasn't like male or female, it was 0 to 100 on both scales, and then would point to kind of the reproductive organs and say, what is your biology? And that you could be anywhere on any of those scales for all 4 of the head, hands, heart, and privates.
Yeah,
And that's how they were taught as from being little kids, that that people can be anywhere on those 4 dimensions.
yeah. I'm just trying to find it to show it to you. You see the genderbread person?
Mm.
Yes.
Okay, so you can see there's identity. It's how you think of yourself. And that goes from woman to man to something in between, which may be genderqueer, agender. And then there's how you express yourself. That could be any part of you, how you dress, how you have your hair, gender expression. And it could be feminine, very feminine, even if you're a male. It could be masculine or androgynous, meaning neither masculine nor feminine, kind of a mixture. And then there's the biological sex. That's your genitals. Do you have a penis or a vagina? That can be male or female or intersex, some of each. And then there's sexual orientation. Are you sexually attracted to the other gender, meaning heterosexual, the same gender, homosexual, or both, bisexual? And all of this is a binary concept where you are thinking it's one or the other, male or female. But now the most important term, I think, in how we think about gender is non-binary, that people don't have to choose male or female. They don't have to be clearly one or the other, but can be something in the middle or some parts of each, not so binary, not making a choice between male or female.
So
Does
it's
that make
also,
sense?
it's also not always linear, because if you look at biological, it's organs, hormones, and chromosomes.
Yes,
So you can have, I mean, it's relatively rare, but you can have mixes of those as well, just in terms of
right,
what you are biologically.
right. We are getting into more what Scott and I are going to be talking about in 2 weeks when we give the program on gender.
Oh, you're all invited back. Yes. 2 weeks from today, Saturday at 3 p.m., Marian and Dr. Scott Mccann doing a whole program on gender, how things have changed since we were kids. So everybody's invited back for that presentation.
And so to getting back a little bit to the story, did you notice how many others in this story were not clearly all male or all female characteristics, that had, that strayed from the confines of traditional gender roles? Who else did you notice that was not clearly
Well,
following the gender roles?
Penn made a point of his not following strict gender roles.
And
Yeah,
yeah, the dad. Well, look at Rosie. She was the breadwinner.
right.
She made all the money for the family. That is not typical female gender role, but now it's very common that women may be the breadwinner, and women may be the lawyer or the doctor or the engineer. But that's a big change from the 50s.
Mm.
And when people are old like me, they remember the 50s.
Yeah, Penn as being the nurturing person that takes care of the children is becoming
Yes,
more popular.
Penn did a terrific job with the children and the fairy tales, and told them the things that help them be self-accepting and work through the challenges of growing up. He did a terrific job. And of course, the grandma that I started to talk about before, Carmelo, she went out and bought the little Claude a pink bikini, and she was totally accepting of that this little boy felt feminine and wanted to wear dresses and wanted to have long hair. And she was the most nurturing to Claude and more in tune with with how Penn felt about things than she was about how her daughter Rosie was, who was a little bit more, let's wait and see, and let's not make these choices for her. And maybe it's too much to deal with the society not accepting her. Another thread, of course, in the book was about the dangers, and that's what Rosie was more worried about, the dangers. Was that something new to you? I think a lot of people don't know about that people can get killed for being a trans woman. Can you understand how that can happen?
Yes.
Black transgender women there is like one of the highest murder victim rates.
Yes. And I think what happens, the reason it's women is because men who fall in love with somebody like that, or who choose a trans woman not knowing that they used to be, or, were born with a penis, and then they feel tricked and they feel it makes them gay if they, had sex with, or, were kissing them, and they resent them, that you made me gay.
Or you
Well,
may,
I think also a lot of men are looking for power, and their power is not working when they find out that the person they thought was female or biologically female is not. So they're very challenged by that.
Yeah.
And angered.
They resent it like hell. Any other comments about that?
I thought it was interesting when they went to Thailand. So for those of you who haven't read the book, something happens in the US, things are revealed, and the mother, who's a surgeon, does some charity work in Thailand and takes Claude Poppy with her. And Thailand, the trans women are all over the place, and it's all very accepting. And they're like, in Thailand, the danger was real danger, like in the jungle, from beasts and bugs and snakes and things like that, and not so much from other people, despite the poverty and the harsh conditions and the lack of medical supplies, that the danger wasn't from other people.
Yeah, the danger was also getting sick and then not having, there's a woman who dies who should not have died if there had been proper medical
Yeah, like
facilities.
the childbirth,
Right.
death and childbirth kind of things. Really pointed out where the issue is. The issue isn't with the child. The issue isn't with the transgender person or intersex person. It's with acceptance. And if there's broad acceptance, then a lot of this issues go away. Yeah, and that's up to us. Yeah.
I think when Rosie decided to take that job doing some work in Thailand, she partly just wanted to get away from the pressures that Poppy was under. That was after there was a big explosion in the family when The Secret came out and Poppy was getting a lot of rejection. And I think Rosie thought, well, this will get her away from that, get Rosie and Poppy away from that. And it turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to Poppy, that she found this culture that was much more accepting of trans people, and that you didn't have to be all male or all female there. You could be accepted. And it was a personal growth for Poppy. It was also a personal growth for Rosie, that she found everything didn't have to be, her whole world as a medical professional was shaken up there too, because she didn't have the supplies, the x-rays, the things that she thought you needed to have, and she had to function differently also. So I think both of them grew tremendously. And of course, Penn missed them a lot, and she missed Penn. And so then when they came back together, that was also a very happy thing.
So to give some things away, when they went to Thailand, Poppy was gone. So Claude came back, but Claude only sort of came back part way. He was a shell of a person. So, I think Tywin then made it possible for Poppy to come back. It's a pretty amazing scenario there. But I also thought it was part of where I got a little, I felt like some of the characters were a little too perfect. So, Rosie could go to Thailand and cure people with, chewing gum and string. it was maybe a little too good, but I forgave the author because I loved the characters so much,
Yeah. Well, I think they showed, some really awful judgmental people like Nick and, the family who said God doesn't make mistakes. They showed those extremes too. And that's real life, that there are going to be people that aren't accepting, and teaching the kids how to get along and not let them negate you and say you're not legitimate is important for building their character too. Susan, you started to say
Yes.
something.
Speaking of this character, Rosie, who is a physician and a surgeon, apparently, I understand. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So that brings me into another area where I'm thinking, what about the medical profession and what about training? Do we know how much of an effect this is having on the medical establishment and medical schools as to what kind of training is being given in this field?
I'm not
hoping it's improving.
I think it's getting better. I'm going to ask Scott, who's presenting with me in 2 weeks, and see if he knows more about that. But certainly, I think there are places that specialize in like the transgender surgeries, and they are getting better. What I have learned from our transgender speakers is that today more and more of the trans men are not having bottom surgery. They're having top surgery. They're removing breasts, but they're not trying to have surgery to create a penis because they're not good enough at it yet. The penis doesn't work well. Whereas those who have trans women surgeries say that they are very good. They can take the penis and turn it inside out and make a vagina. And those women are more likely to have orgasms than we who were born with the clitoris outside of the vagina. It's harder for us to have orgasms with intercourse, but they have the penis is right there. So maybe that's working very well, but the making the penis is not working so well. So the younger people that have spoken in my class have opted not to have surgery. One guy said, and he was, the female to male transgenders are very much better looking. They look like males because they grow beards from the hormone replacements. They are able to grow beards, and they don't have to worry as the women do about receding hairlines and getting bald as the male to females do. So they look good. So the surgeries are different. And I think the places that do this kind of surgery, and I understand there's some that are maybe in Thailand, or they have specialists there that do that. But there are places in the United States also that specialize in trans surgery. And of course, there are the most liberal places like San Francisco, where companies are paying for that surgery and are considering it as essential surgery for people, and not saying, oh, that's, we're not paying for that. So that's good news.
Thank you.
Anybody have other things that they would like to talk about? Another area that was a big theme, I think, was how important family is. And any comments about, I thought Poppy was able to count on her parents for unconditional love, and even her brothers and her grandma for getting her the pink bikini. And Penn was able to publish his fairy tales, which he did before doing his novel, which was his original goal. But his fairy tales were so successful that I guess he found a publisher for that.
So I learned a lot about parenting. Maybe I did, because I'm not a parent. I've never been married. I never had kids. I've been an orphan for a long time. So I didn't have a real functional family myself. So I kind of enjoyed vicariously experiencing their family and the family dynamics. And again, I thought those boys were, maybe they were all geniuses, a little too good to be true, but it created, it was a nice dynamic. And then like watching what Rue went through and how he was misperceived and what his attitude was, that was a really big thing, I thought.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention that in the chat, I put a link to the Pigeon Pagonis documentary page. And also, I think I got it correctly, that the Netflix shows you were talking about, Ballet Boys and the character Cat in Madam Secretary. I put that in the chat. You also had a poll for the end, and do you want that
Yeah.
up, Marian,
Yeah,
now, or?
Let's do the ending poll. Did reading this book increase your support and empathy for people living with gender dysphoria?
There's no change option.
Oh.
Or if you didn't read the book.
Yeah, so you could put, if you didn't read the book, put not sure. Are you more likely to support the issues and needs of gender dysphoric people? Wave your hand if you need some more time.
So hopefully people can see the results.
Yeah, that's nice. Most people felt more likely to be supportive. That's great. Well, thank you all for being here and taking part in this. I think we had a lot of positive things said, and it's very nice to know that.
You got a few more allies out there.
Yeah, we got a few more allies, so that's good. Thank you for being allies. Thank you for being here. And if anybody has other questions, I'm happy to be available if you want to talk or have questions, or
Great.
I should give my phone number, 805-968-0478.
Thanks, Marian.
Marian, it was
you.
fabulous. Very good. Thank you
Thank you.
so much for sharing with us.
Thanks, Marian.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, come back in 2 weeks and then see Marian and Scott do their show together.
Scott is a little younger than I am, so he's less likely to be struggling for words the way I am now.
Dr. Scott Mccann, been a licensed clinical social worker for 40 years. He served as the Vice President for Education at Planned Parenthood for 16 years, Director of Education at Santa Barbara County Health Department for 6 years. He also taught human sexuality at Santa Barbara City College and at Antioch for 20 years, and currently facilitates the prostate cancer discussion group at Ridley Tree. So very impressive background as well. Should be a great talk in 2 weeks. Thanks everybody for attending. Doris, thank you. Sharon, Vince, Jill,
Thank you,
Nan.
Marian, for leading, and thanks, Judy and the Humanist Society, for putting this on, and thanks for turning me on to the book.
All right,
Great.
you're welcome.